Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Removed Abilities. It's been a few months since episode 5, so time to get to work on episode 6. I know I said episode 6 was being worked on by the time you saw episode 5, but I decided to take a break from it for a while. Nevertheless, there's still like 2 or 3 more episodes worth of stuff to talk about, so let's cut right to the chase and get started. Some of these were highly requested by a number of you, so hope you look forward to it. First one's gonna be Zyra's old passive. Death passives are kind of a dying breed, and when I say dying breed, I'm more referring to them never making any new ones, but this was one of the cooler ones because, unlike Kog'Maws, this was actually really scary to get hit by. Upon taking fatal damage, Zyra would transform into a friggin' ballista for 8 seconds, and from 2 seconds onwards, she can fire what's effectively a Vars Q that deals true damage to all enemies. So very similar to Kog'Maw, it was a damage-based death passive. Still a downgrade compared to Swain, Zac, and especially Karthus, but Rise of the Thorns was actually something you had to respect. It had a fairly fast projectile speed and long range to boot, so while you had 2 seconds to get the hell away from her, if you were close to death yourself, you were at risk of getting sniped by her while she was dead. It's a strange passive to have on a control mage like her though. I can see why she used to have it, considering it makes killing her first less than favorable, like how you want to save Karthus and Scion for last, but by design, Zyra was always about slow and steady attrition, gradually poking you in neutral, not really suiciding into the enemy team to blast people. Definitely a remnant of an older time in the game where some champs just had funny gimmicks like these. I will say the new passive is more practical though. Next ability will be Swain's ultimate, the OG Ravenous Flock. You have no idea how much I miss this ability. Such a simple premise for how fun and effective it was. On activation, he would start sending ravens to up to 5 nearby enemies to damage them periodically and heal him for each target struck. The ultimate could last indefinitely in exchange for a mana cost that would increase for each additional second it was active for, so eventually at a certain point you didn't have to deactivate it lest you lose all your mana, where you would then have to wait again before reactivating it. The tooltip shows a cooldown of 20 seconds, but prior to 6.9 it used to have a cooldown of 8 seconds, basically making it a normal ability. Naturally, this was a good neutral tool given it can push waves and regen your health, and it was also good for trades on account of a short cooldown. Old Swain in general was just a really interesting champion. He was all about area control, from his Q to W to ultimate. You had to really understand the extent of his neutral game, as he wasn't a particularly strong all-in champion, nor was he good at shaking off opponents in disadvantage. Current Swain's ultimate, like Zyra's new passive, is just more practical and comes with a lot more impact in a fight, especially immediately. But there was something special about his old one. I miss toggle abilities as a whole, to be honest. Swain in particular was one of those champs who was either completely useless or one of the most difficult to shut down when he got going. He basically had a choke off passive but for only mana, so theoretically while his Q, W, E, and ultimate were expensive to use, you could stay out forever with like 2 Doran rings back when it restored mana with every unit kill. From that, you were easily able to tell the difference between a good and bad Swain based on how well he managed his mana pool. Granted, Swain's ultimate was annoying as hell to fight against as it was sustained in neutral. Just press it while pushing a wave and he would sometimes regen back to full. Then of course, being a ranged top laner with the point and click dot ability was not that fun to deal with either, but he was one of my favorite mages for being less demanding on mechanics and more in game sense and knowledge, which is my forte. Next ability, or should I say 2 abilities, are Urgot's Q and E, Acid Hunter and Noxian Corrosive Charge. Urgot was one of those champs whose Q effectively replaced his basic attack. On a 2-second cooldown, he would shoot a missile in a straight line that dealt roughly the equivalent of an auto attack's worth of damage. Fairly mellow on its own, but if he tags someone with Corrosive Charge, Acid Hunter becomes a point-and-click ability while gaining slightly increased range. From this, Urgot essentially acquires a basic attack range of 1200, turning an otherwise unremarkable attack into a dangerous poke tool, one that you had no way of avoiding, so your goal was to dodge his E, since if you didn't, you would take at least 2 Qs to the face, and over time that would add up. Then I guess for additional context there was Terror Capacitor, which gave Acid Hunter a slow, preventing you from running away from him. It was one of those reasons why Urgot was allowed to be an ADC who went Muramana, Black Cleaver, Frozen Heart, and then maybe some more tank items. He would chip away at you from a long range without you being able to do anything. Most people remember Urgot for his old ultimate, which to be fair is without question his most iconic ability, and one of the strangest abilities of all time, but I don't think OG League players give enough attention to his basic abilities. It was such an annoying playstyle to be on the receiving end of. As covered in my Urgot retrospective, the central issue with old Urgot was that his entire playstyle was just that, making him not only one of the weakest ADCs in the game compared to conventional crit scaling marksmen, but also kind of boring too. You could pull off some janky shenanigans with his ultimate, but the novelty will wear off after a couple of games. New Urgot, on the other hand, is much more dynamic and skill expressive, one of the best reinventions any champion has ever received. Still though, once again, old League of Legends was a very interesting game, back when things weren't as formulaic and the champion design team tried a bunch of random stuff out. Okay, our next ability is going to be Tristana's Old E, Explosive Shot. Though it's a rather forgettable skill, I wanted to talk about this one for how strange it is to have on a champion of her category. Tristana is a very advantaged state marksman, as in she's at her best when on the offensive, chasing down enemies. Until draw B gives her more range, her neutral is not all that great. though she is one of the more independent AD carries out there courtesy of Rocket Jump and Buster Shot. Curiously though, Tristana has a ton of AP scaling and magic damage in her kit. Rocket Jump does magic damage and scales off AP, the Explosion upon minion kill also does magic damage, Explosive Charge has an AP ratio of almost 150% of full damage, and Buster Shot's also AP with magic damage, yet I don't recall ever seeing AP Tristana before, like ever. The active part of Explosive Charge does physical damage, but her ulti, Explosive Shot, was a purely AP-focused magic damage ability. She had the same AoE clearing passive that she does now, but the active was just a blast to a single enemy that would apply grievous wounds and damage over time. This meant that Tristana's kit once did only magic damage and had only AP ratios. She had no AD ratios in her kit or physical damage whatsoever, yet I can't seem to remember Tristana building AP in the past either. You pretty much had a marksman with 4 utility spells: Q for attack speed, W for mobility, E for healing reduction, and ultimate for peel or finishing damage. I get that being in bot lane where there's a high likelihood for there to be some kind of sustain, 5 seconds of grievous wounds can be really good for trades or all-ins, but with the 16-second cooldown, this ability seems really bad for what's meant to serve as Tristana's main damaging tool outside of her autos. Comparing that with Explosive Charge, which is a much bigger threat and more in line with their go big or go home attitude, I wonder how Tristana was even good back in the day. I remember back in World Season 4, Uzi played Tristana a lot, though I did start playing actively in Season 5, so maybe it was more of a question of itemization that made her strong, not her own abilities, but comparing her oldie with her existing one, it makes me wonder why anyone in their right mind would have played her old one, because her old kit had no compatibility with AD items. Moving on though, let's talk about Soraka's oldie. This is a funny one. Everyone knows Soraka as the healing bot. She gives up her own HP to heal her team, and is arguably the most basic autofill support champion for anyone to play. Well, would you believe me if I told you she restored not just health, but mana as well? Prior to being replaced by Equinox, Soraka Z was infused, which had a friend or foe-based activation. When being used on a friendly, she would juice them up with mana, so for all intents and purposes, Soraka was a walking health and mana bank. Now, when being used on an enemy, she did damage to them and silenced them for 1.5 to 2.5 seconds. Given the ally activation is a point and click, I'm assuming the enemy activation was also point and click. Just imagine a point and click 2.5 second silence in this day and age. Either way, I'm sure it was a very simple reason why they took this out. Soraka's old kit was the most 1990s JRPG white mage kit of all time. Nothing but restorative abilities, and that's about it. Mind you, during the first few years of League, the game was a lot simpler. It wasn't uncommon for champions to have one-dimensional kits like these. I wondered though, would Soraka be worse or better if she had infused in the modern era compared to Equinox? Obviously Equinox is better as a crowd control tool, but a central challenge of laning phase is resource management. Expending all your mana too early forces you to recall back to base even if you're still relatively healthy. So having someone like Raka basically serve as a secondary health and mana pool sounds really stupid broken. Her previous Star Call was Shred Magic Resist too, and her old W even gave bonus armor for 2 seconds, up to 110 bonus armor plus AP at that, so she was a walking ball of stats and resources. I wasn't around during this version of Soraka, but I have to ask, did she get reworked for being too stat checky in a literal sense, or did she get reworked for being too overpowered? Part of me thinks her old kit would be insane to have nowadays. I get that she has nothing in regards to actual combat, which might make her an easy engaged target for tank or kill supports, but overall, I wonder what it was like to have a support who can refill your HP and mana on demand. Anyway, let's keep going. Next ability is going to be Volibear's old passive, Chosen of the Storm. When dropping below 30% HP, he regenerates 30% HP over 6 seconds. You can think of this as a built-in Sterex gauge, but instead of a shield, it's regeneration. Rudimentary as it was, this was why Volibear was so strong in the early game. Well, that and Frenzy's ridiculous base damage and health scaling. I can't tell you the number of times I played Volibear and the enemy jungler or top laner saw me at half HP thinking I was an easy kill only for me to suddenly stop taking damage because I was healing faster than they could deal damage. There's a reason Volibear's passive had a cooldown of 2 minutes. This thing was broken. In the early to mid game where most champions don't have tons of DPS and tank shredding yet, Volibear was nearly invincible with this passive, regenerating 5% max health per second for 6 seconds. Hardly anyone can chunk you down that fast, especially while you're building full tank. Many people consider Volibear a cheese champion because of attacks like Frenzy, Majestic Roar, and Chosen of the Storm, and in all honesty, he kind of was a matchup check. If you knew what he did, much of his threat level would disappear, but if you don't know what he did, or didn't respect what he could do, he would steamroll all over you. Of all the one-sentence passives that existed back in the day, this had to be one of the more combat-effective ones. Second to last ability is going to be Draven's old passive. Draven's current passive is the definition of Feast or Famine. If you scored a kill, you can potentially acquire double, triple, quadruple, even quintuple gold if you can stack that much without dying. And for the longest time, that's what he was known for. But once upon a time, he used to have a passive very similar to his brother's, Wicked Blades, wherein spinning axe autos or critical strikes would apply a bleed over 4 seconds. They took this passive away in 3.9, so it's understandable why many players don't even know Wicked Blades was a thing. Frankly, I can't decide on which one would be more suited for his kit. Obviously, his old passive is more suited for actual combat, whereas League of Draven's more of a snowballing passive. But 90% of Draven's identity is that passive. It's how the Draven main stereotype came to be and the reason behind his overly aggressive playstyle. If he had Wicked Blades, he would still be aggressive, don't get me wrong, but I feel like this kind of passive would encourage a more poke-oriented playstyle and less of an I have to annihilate the enemy ADC's entire existence playstyle. I'm not sure if Tyler1 watches my content, but if he does, someone send this to him and ask him if he would rather have League of Draven or Wicked Blades. On one hand, completing a first item in 7 minutes is awesome, but on another, having an actual combat passive will make Draven's insane kill power that much more insane. Last abilities, Mordekaiser's Harvester of Sorrow. This is a doozy. First, it has a passive that gives extra XP to his teammates, accelerating your rate of leveling quite noticeably. On activation, he creates a circle around himself and a nearby minion or allied champion. For the next 4 seconds, they get more movement speed when walking towards one another, and if the circles are in range of each other, the circles activate and create a damaging aura for quite a bit of DPS, I might add. Upon reactivation, or at the end of the duration, it will deal more damage and then heal Mordekaiser and the unit he tags for up to 2 enemies hit. It's actually a massive heal too if you manage to tag 2 champions, 380 base plus 60% AP, so towards the mid to late game, a single Mordekaiser W could heal both targets for upwards of 800 HP, maybe even more with Visage. What I enjoy about this ability is that it takes an otherwise really basic premise and adds a bit of coordination and skill expression to it, as opposed to Darkness Rise where the condition is to just damage the champion 3 times. The best time to fight old Mordekaiser was when he was completely by himself, since he couldn't achieve that damaging aura unless he was near another minion or champion. And that was a non-negligible portion of his damage too, 300 base plus 90% AP. The bonus experience thing was just a gimmick to have him work down in bot lane, and of course the reason you wanted to play Mordekaiser bot in the first place was for the dragon, so you can have it as a pet. In other roles like top lane though, this made wave management a very critical part of playing him. He could heal a ton with this W, deal a ton of damage, and also use it to push a wave a lot faster. It was such a unique ability. I actually played old Mordekaiser a ton back in the day, and while I'm aware the new Mordekaiser is a much more practical champion, and nowhere near as infested with bugs and glitches like he used to be, again, like most old school champions, there was something special about his old kit. I can talk about all of his abilities, and I definitely will, so you can look forward to me covering Iron Man and Mace of Spades in future episodes. Alrighty, that concludes episode 6 of Removed Abilities. I'm getting old, man. I've been playing this game for almost 10 years now, and the longer I'm stuck in this hellscape for, the more I realize perhaps I treated seasons 5, 6, and 7 too harshly. The game feels so complicated and overly bloated now that looking back on these old janky abilities reminds me of like pre-Big Bang Maple Story. Obviously the old days were a mess if we go by gameplay quality, but it was a simpler time. I can only imagine what it must have been like for seasons 1, 2, and 3, the days of Shinjawa release, or that kind of stuff. But anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, it would be great if you're allowed to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at VarsFair, join my Discord server, and check out my other Removed Abilities episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.